So now we've done a bit of code, it's time to go back and maintain the code, to look for to-dos, to fix bugs, to merge pull requests, the general maintenance that we should probably do once every few weeks to keep on top of, cleanliness and going back and fixing small issues, and also so you don't miss anything in this series. So I've had a couple of pull requests come in. I've had a few mentions of thread safety and code. I've spotted a few typos myself. All those little things are what we need to now look at and clean up. So this video is going to kind of show you my general maintenance cycle of code. So let's just jump in and get started. So one of the first things that got spotted that I even said I'd do in the video and simply forgot is disposing of the Bluetooth device, because I noticed it was pulling COM objects in. So hence it should definitely look at being disposed of. So if we go to this from Bluetooth address, it will return a Bluetooth LE device, and you can see it's disposable. And then as we hovered over the objects in the device, we realized that some of this stuff was returning COM objects, hence why it will be disposable. But either way, because it's got disposable here, we obviously should be doing that. Now, there's a new way to do this in C# 8, and because I've got the latest version of Visual Studio, which has now got .NET Core 3, originally you could do using, and then the device, and then wrap the whole lot in a using statement, like this. But the problem with that is it adds an indentation layer, which is not preferred in code, because what you get is this starting to happen. You start here, you're already 2 levels indented, then you indent again, then again, then again, then again, and you end up with code that's halfway over your screen. So you try to prefer things like, instead of saying if device isn't equal to null, do this code behind, you say, well, if it is null, escape. You try to invert the logic as much as possible to reduce this indentation. In terms of the using statement, now in C# 8, so just make sure you've got the latest Visual Studio installed, so you get .NET Core 3, you can do using var device, and then in here we're getting the warning that we're not using the latest language, so you can upgrade this project to version 8, and then we'll see in when we come to committing Git what this is done. It will basically add the language variable to the project. We're going to upgrade them all to version 8. So if we do that, we can also take a quick look at Git Kraken now to see what that's done, so you spot the change. When this is finished, that should go away as well as the warning. I think it just needs closing and reopening to, update that logic. So possibly have to restart this. So let's just close that. Open up Git Kraken, and let's just take a look now at what it did change, so if you want to manually upgrade them, or if you have issues where it is basically. So if we go to Blueberry and look at the changes so far, you can see in here it's now put lang version 8, and it's done that basically for every project file. We've also got a change in the design here, which is, we're just going to dispose of that for now. That's just when I've compiled Android, it's decided to change its automatically generated file. So, well, that's going to get commit anyway, I guess, because that's now how it generates. So if we just restart Visual Studio, we should get that warning going away. And we still do not. Let's see in the project file then. And would you look at that, it hasn't added the language file to this. So obviously Visual Studio has not realized that yet. That's a bug they have. So let's copy and paste this lang version from the console into the actual Bluetooth Windows library here, and then it's gone away. So for some reason, it did not like automatically adding it to there we go, because for one, we want to upgrade these to .NET Core 3 as well. Maybe that was why it didn't add the language, but it should have added the language. Irrelevant. But it seemed to have just missed this. So let's just double check that it's added them to all of them in that case. So you can't always rely on the IntelliSense doing what it says. So for example, this one hasn't. So let's just make sure all of them are on language 8. Oops. So it seems to have hardly done it for any of them. So probably best just to have done this manually in the first place. So go through. We've already done that one. And of course, on the older projects, we have to unload to edit the CS_proj file. The lang version's in that one. And unload the iOS. Yep, and the UI. It's missing from that. So it doesn't look like it's added it to any of the .NET Standard 2 projects. So let's reload that. And reload that. And let's just compile to make sure this compiles still. Yep. And then next thing we will do is to also upgrade all these now to .NET Core. In fact, these have got to stay .NET Standard 2.0 because of the Xamarin thing. But we can upgrade all of our non-Xamarin related stuff to .NET Core 3. So we'll upgrade the console app to 3. The Windows app is already on 3 because we made, obviously, a version of WPF.NET Core 3. The Bluetooth one is Windows specific, so that can be .NET Core 3. It's just things that reference Xamarin that we can't upgrade. And in fact, we could actually try to upgrade Core to 2.1 now to see if Xamarin's actually released an update, which they haven't, it's failed already. But it's worth keep trying that or just reading up the release notes to see if they eventually support 2.1, which I would have thought they would have done. But I've already seen it fail down here, so we're going to get a failure that it's not compatible yet. So, or is that just complaining because UI is referencing it actually? So if we update UI as well, maybe Xamarin now actually supports 2.1, which would be nice. Yeah, so actually now we can upgrade those to 2.1. It's worked. We are best also running this, at least run it through the emulator or something to make sure this still works. Now we've upgraded the language and the framework. They're two fairly big potential changes. So that's deployed fine. So we're good there. It hasn't broken anything, and we've upgraded the packages. Then let's also go to the solution, right click and do manage NuGet packages for solution. Go to updates and let's see what updates there are. Whenever you're doing an update of packages as well, it's always good to retest your application. Because we have practically nothing in this application so far, I'm not concerned about that whatsoever. So I'm literally going to do 0 testing bar the fact that it compiles for now. Any bugs that come about in this stage of development are just part of development with that early on. But if this is an established application with code, then you don't necessarily just go and upgrade packages willy-nilly. You do have to consider a good time to upgrade your packages. But when you're in the early stages of development, upgrade often so that you're constantly on the latest code. And then we'll build once more. Sometimes as well, when you've upgraded packages, you will have to just delete and clear the bin and object folder, the VS folder, the hidden .vs folder. Give it a good purge sometimes from updates. They just get confused with old code and new code. In this case, it looks like it's going to compile. It'll take a little while as well because the Android has been completely wiped and rebuilt. And then once more, now we've upgraded packages, let's just run the emulator and see if it loads. So this is the old one still open, I think, because it says deploying down here still. There we go. It's killed the existing one and it's spinning up the new one. And then there we go. So yeah, everything's fine there. And then what I would also do, what we haven't been doing, but what is good to do is as we're going through this, we should commit each unit of work as a git commit. Your git commits should really be small chunks of work. So we're just going to open up Git Kraken and commit what we've done so far. And then we've already, in theory, done 2 commits here that we want to separate. So if we look at what we've done, and we hide that down a minute, we've upgraded the language and the target framework here. And we've done it for, so if we stage that, we've done it for this one, we stage that, stage that. Now that's added assembly name in the Windows app. We haven't added that, that's automatically added it now. So that must be part of the upgrade. So I could remove it and recompile and see if that goes away, but we didn't add that. So I'm happy with that though. That just basically means the file name is going to be, the name of the project. That's fine. This is irrelevant to the current commit. This is nothing to do with that. Neither is this designer file, which is change things around and move stuff around. This Android one, now really, we only added that, but by recompiling after an upgrade, it's added all of this from the upgrade. And actually, it's added it twice here. So now we have this twice. So we may want to, let's take a quick look at that. We go to the Android and unload. And this is why it's also good to actually do look at your commits in the code changes. Don't just blindly commit stuff. So we have, there we go, we've got a condition in debug and in release to add the lang version. So for some reason, it added it to there instead of the generic one. So I'm going to actually cut that out of there and just put it in the generic non-conditional statement here. Because there's no reason to have a language version different based on debug or release. At least not in our case anyway. So that's that one done. Let's double check the iOS in that case. Let's make sure it hasn't done the same because it auto-added for us. And it's done the same again. It's added it to the debug and the release. So let's cut it out of them two, paste it into the main, non-conditional. See there, property group's got no condition, whereas this has. And it's added it to every single condition. So yeah, I would not bother using that automatic IntelliSense at the minute. That clearly hasn't done the most efficient job of doing that. That will build and run. I'm happy with that. So let's look at that again. We should have lang version once. This is then from the package updates, which is going to be part of this. It's all part of package updates, framework updates, and language updates, which will be the commit message. So it will be package, language, and framework updates, just keeping everything up to date. This one's got the single version now and the updated packages, and the mobile UI has got the same again. So if we stage that file, and that file, you can now see we're left with the other 2 changes, which we're leaving. We're not staging those at the minute because that's not part of this commit. And if we look at what we've staged, it's basically the project files. So we will commit this as a single commit here now. And that's one. And then the next thing we've changed is here, we've now disposed of this using. So that should again be its own commit. So we stage that, dispose of the Bluetooth device class. And just double check again. Yep, that's that. And then what we're left with here for now, I'm just going to leave in here. It will, obviously that's because we've regenerated. It's simply move things around. It's an auto-generated file. If you get stuff like this, I generally chuck it in with a commit that's relative to it. If not, then I'd potentially just commit it as auto-generated file updates, just because they sometimes happen when you do an update. But I'm going to leave that for now in case we get more changes like this and we do it in one commit. So we've got those 2 commits now nicely separated and easy to see. So that's those 2 changes. One more fix that I noticed here that I spotted as I'd left 2 semicolons. Now it's not complaining, but it's obviously completely superfluous. We don't need that. So that's another small fix. A small fix like that I wouldn't bother committing on its own typically unless there was nothing else to do. I'd group that kind of fix into code cleanup commits, just called code cleanup, which would probably include spell checking as well. So that kind of commit would be grouped in that bundle. Another thing to look for when you compile, you want to go to the error list and make sure that you've got a blue border around errors and warnings and also messages if you like. And you want to make sure there's no warnings. The biggest thing that I see a lot of developers doing is just ignoring warnings. If it doesn't crash, they just ignore warnings and you end up with hundreds of warnings in your project and then you never go back and fix them. So always fix your warnings. Maybe not, every day, but maybe in your code cleanup sessions like this one, that's what you want to do. Messages are more, they're less than even a warning. They're just a general message. Like here it's telling me we've created this MGAT service IDs, but we haven't used it, so we could remove it. Now, we're aware of that because we plan to use it. We just haven't got to the code yet. So that's why it's kind of a message, not even a warning. And this one's telling us we can remove the unused args string from this console, which we could do because we're not using it here, but we might want to use it in future. But the idea of code is always to only add things when you need them. So we could do control dot and, oh no, we can't. It's not going to give us the ability to just do that through, you got control dot to remove it, but it's telling us to remove unused parameter. So if we wanted to clean up that message, we could do that. And then we can always add that back in future. So that's what I'm going to do there as well. So now we're down to one message, which we know we will fix, and no warnings, no errors. So that's important to do. Then the next thing I'd do, if I'm doing this, is to go to view. And this is, again, something that I think 95% of developers don't even know. So in code, when I do things like, you'll see here, or you should see, like here, there's a to-do. When I write to-do in capitals and a colon, I'm doing that for a set reason. It's not just because that's, it looks a specific way. This is a very specific way of writing a comment. And the reason is, if you go to view and task list, you'll actually see anywhere in code that you've written a comment with to do in will show in your task list. And what used to happen, and I don't know whether it's since changed it now, is you could make anything. Like you could say, Luke to do. This is a task for Luke. And that would also show in your task list. So I don't know whether this just needs refreshing or whether it's updating as we go. Yeah, so they seem to have removed the custom definition, unless it's because I've got a hyphen in it, maybe. Yeah, they seem to have removed that. Maybe there's an option now to re-enable it, but you used to be able to add, any tag here with a colon, and then it would show up as an item in your task list to do. So let's just search in here for task list, and let's have a look at the settings. So there we go. So you can see here, you now have task list tokens, and these are what will flag up. So you can have hack, undo, to do, and then we could add in here our own. So you could click, in fact, it's not letting us add our own in here. Oh, you have to add it over here. It's not exactly obvious. So I did like Luke to do and clicked add, and then OK. Now, if I did the Luke to do and then went to task list, you can see now I've got a task for me to do. And then we could filter by Luke to do and show just task for me. So we can make use of this. I already do with to do naturally. And then being able to have custom tags like this is helpful. But for now, let's just remove that custom one. You have to bear in mind, if I add a custom one here as well, the list isn't necessarily going to show up for you guys because you don't have this in your list. So the ones that will be by default is hack, to do, and undo. And that's just a useful feature to know about. You can see in ours, the task list only has this one at the minute, which is get more info and connect, which is the plan of the next video. But that's something I'd do, is periodically check your comment to-dos, because this is yet another thing that developers very frequently see. They write a to-do and then they just carry on and they never ever go back to fix or even look at their to-dos. So try and keep your to-dos organized and link this to, ideally, if you're going to use like GitLab, add it to an issue in GitLab, or if we're going to use GitHub, then we want to add it to part of the project tab to track this as a piece of code to do. For now, we're going to do this in the next video, so that's what we'll come to after that. And the final thing I think I needed to fix in here, well, there's two. One is to keep an eye out for spell checking errors, so anything with a purple squiggly line to make sure we haven't misspelt things. So you generally keep an eye on those as you're going through your code and see if you spot any. And I don't in this case, so we're good there. And the last one was a thread locking issue with this class. So I haven't talked much about thread locking yet. I'll probably do a separate video on it. But the idea is multiple threads can access this class's callback or certain things in this class, primarily due to the fact that we have this asynchronous callback, if you will. Now, it's not necessarily asynchronous, but it is in a sense. It's basically the received callbacks can happen on multiple threads. When they come in, this can happen, and things can happen in different orders. So you'll have multiple threads accessing this class, which also means if you receive a Bluetooth device, it comes in, this function is called on one thread, and our actual console app could say, we're going to call into this same class that it's created and call, say, the stop listening. So this stop listening function could be running at the same time, if you will, if you want to think of it that way, or basically on a different thread, this call. So I'm not going to go too much into depth about explaining threads because I'm going to do a really bad job when I'm not bothered to think about it. This is just a quick overview, but just think of it that this code could come in here, run this line, then this line, then this line, and then the CPU could decide that it's actually going to jump over and run the first line of the stop call. So it's going to then actually jump into here and run this line and then this line. So they can run out of order, which means you could have a piece of code that would say clear the devices, and then instead of the next line presuming that that's clear, the received device could come in and add a device, and this next line of code is making an invalid assumption, if you will. So the point of locking is to make sure that any code inside of here can only ever be run on one thread if the other code that's being run is inside the same locking statement. So if we do a locking statement like this and lock on this specific object, and we also do the same statement elsewhere that we've done like here and locked, what it assures is that this code in here will always run from here to here, fully run. And the same here, it will run from here to here. When anything, you can never break up this flow, basically. When you can break up this flow is if stuff in here is being accessed, like this mdiscovered devices, from something that doesn't bother to lock around it. And that's the basic issue you have with threading. It's very easy to overlook issues like that. And there's been a debate on the Discord channel, if you've been following, showing that we still don't have full thread safety on this. And it's not necessarily really obvious and jumps out at you straight away. So the issue we've seen, and it's not necessarily an issue that would crash the application, but it's an assumption that when we call stop in our code, we're clearing the list. So we expect after we've stopped there to be nothing in the list to show in the UI. The issue we have at the minute is that's actually possible to end up with after you've stopped something in the list. And the reason is the callback here, when you receive an item, you could receive an item at this point in time. So we say here to lock, check if we have the device already, and then unlock. And the issue is this gap here, because then we add the device after. So if we come into code here and we run this code, and we check that at this point in time, check if there's a new device, and then we unlock. And then now here, the stop call gets jumped in, and it clears the list. But then as this carries on, the next line of code here will then add it to the device. So now the list has an element in because we've actually cleared the list since then, but we're still inside this received call. So the issue is that we should really check if we are still listening at the point of right before adding it to the device, because the key is when you stop listening, we flag, listening effectively is calculated based on the status being started. So when we stop, it will change the status to not listening. So we want to firstly include this entire statement here because it's all the same logic. It's checking if we have the device and if we should add it. So if we just remove this and those two lines and just redo the bottom bracket to fix the formatting, This now locks the whole unit of work of figuring out, should we add this device? And right before we add it, the very moment before we add it, we should check if we are still listening and return. Because we could have stopped here and it's still fine because we've received the request that there's another device already. So it's not like, we can check here, are we still listening, return, because it could happen at any point on another thread. The actual check for if you're listening isn't inside this lock anywhere. It's part of the underlying class. So we want to do it the moment before we add. So we want to check in here now that basically says if we are listening still. And again, to invert the logic, we want to do if not listening, just return. Don't bother doing anything. So that's if we are no longer listening, don't bother adding to the list and do nothing. So this will shortcut the potential issue of just ending up with a device in the list after we've stopped. And it's a very easy thing to overlook in code. And it's also a very easy thing that you would not think is an issue. Some people wouldn't think it's an issue because it doesn't crash the code, but it's an issue in what the product should do. We're expecting to discover devices, and if the user clicks stop, the UI doesn't want to still see an item in the list. It's a bit confusing. And it would also be very hard to debug for most people because it's one of those things that this is a very specific thing to pay attention to, and you have to follow the potential order of how this could come about. So this is something that most people wouldn't spot, and I simply overlooked as I was writing it. And that's also the benefit of having a community watching your code as well, because they point out issues like this. So it's really good to see, the feedback and the improvement in code from having extra sets of eyes watching what you're doing. That's why I really enjoy working with the community now. So that's that. We've now got an issue with name change not being defined because it's inside here. So we'll just have to do the Boolean outside of the lock, var name changed equals false by default, and then it will set in here. So that's the fix for that locking issue. There may be other locking issues in this class. So if you guys want to fully review this class and think of similar situations, see if you can spot any more locking issues, and we'll get them fixed as well. So I think that's all in our code here. So let's just jump over to Git Kraken and commit these. So we have now expand all. We have the remove of unnecessary string args. So I'm actually going to compile that, or rather commit that, along with this resources file, because the two just kind of small commits and no real relevance. So this will be code cleanup and auto generated file changes. Just a basic, non-important. Anyone that looks at it knows what's going on. So commit that. And now we have this one, which we've now fixed the thread locking issue specifically. And we've also done a code cleanup there. So what I could have done, if I wasn't rushing and just clicking away, I could have done stage hunk here, which is like staging a chunk of code. I could have staged that little piece of code there, the semicolon fix, in with the previous commit. And I should have done, I've just simply overlooked it. So for now, this will just get chucked in with this commit. So we staged that one, and this is thread lock issue with items in discovered list after stopping Bluetooth watcher. And we will commit that. And that's all of our commits now. So you can see the difference here now. We've done 4 commits and they're all small, as opposed, larger commits. And larger commits are fine, but it's much easier to work with small chunks, and you should try and commit chunks in, smaller manageable commits so they're easier to review and fix. So if we push that live, that will be the code changes for this cleanup session. So I've done those code changes. I'm happy with those. And the last thing I'll brush over is there are a few pull requests on GitHub. And if I go to pull requests, I will do a separate video on how you guys make pull requests. But for now, you can just Google, GitHub pull request. It will show you how to make one, but I'll do a separate video on it. But these are 2 pull requests I've had from the community to fix things. And that means the community has found issues with my code, pulled this branch, made a fork, made the changes, commit them, and requested for me to merge their fixes into my code. So this is how GitHub typically works for the community to work with you and give you feedback and edit your code. This is how it will work. So I'll do a video on pull request shortly. But let's take a look at this namespace one. This goes all the way back to near the beginning of code. You can see a bunch of people have also approved it, which is basically a hint to me to simply say, it looks like this code is valid and there's no issues. They can't actually push this into code because they don't have permissions. But what they're doing is effectively giving a thumbs up to it to say this is a good commit. You can look at the commits here in commit 1 and click on the title of each commit. And you can see the fix was in the start of making the WPF app, I overlooked renaming the source.app namespace to blueberry.desktop.windowsapp.app, and it actually worked. And that's probably just because in fact, I'm not sure why it's worked. It's probably just a bug at the minute in WPF 3.0 that it's not realized that and picked up in order to crash, or simply because we're not using anything in the UI yet, so the class behind isn't trying to access the XAML, hence why we're not seeing an issue. But nevertheless, this is an issue, and this is showing me what my code currently is and what the fix is. And if I'm happy with that, I can review the changes and make comments and say, oh no, this needs to be done, or I can approve each individual one. But when the commits are all okay and it doesn't break your code, there's no conflicts, you will get this automatic ability here to just click merge pull request. And that's what I'm going to do in this case. And then the comment to that is going to be fix namespaces, and we merge. So that's now accepted code from an outside developer that's fixed our code that's now been merged into our actual code in Blueberry. So if I go back to code now and go to commits, you will see these are the commits from me today. And this one, even though it's showing as me here, it's because I've merged it. This is a commit as a merge pull request and from this user here, and that it's been verified by GitHub that it's a valid commit. And then if I now go to my code here, you can see my local machine, this laptop picture, is actually behind now the master. So that means there's code in there's code on GitHub that's more advanced than the code on this machine, and that changes this one. So I can now pull that change down onto my machine. And if we look at that first, you can see on my machine right now in the Windows app, in the app.xaml, you can see my class currently is source.app. If I now move that, say, if I do a side by side so you can see it change, minimize that, you can see here now the file there. You can see here the master. So if I pull the changes down, it will automatically update this here. And if I click into focus, you can see it's updated that code. So now we have the code changes from the pull request that somebody else has done. So that's updated that code. I don't need to push anything because it's been done on the website in GitHub. It's already merged it. Now we have this one pull request left, which is fix potential concurrency issue. I've got a feeling this is related to the issue I've just fixed. And you can see here what happens when code has since changed. That now means it can't automatically figure out what the change should be. So it's saying there's conflicts that must be resolved using a web editor or command line. So we can, and it's telling us it's this file, the watcher. You can click resolve conflicts, and in here it will show, and it shows in a kind of funky way. But basically, the forward arrows and outward arrows, so less than and greater than, show that this is the start tag, this is the end tag, and everything in between is what's changed on master, as in my code, the main code. The difference is that I have this here, and it looks all messy like this, and it's hard to see. And the differences are these two. In fact, this web UI is terrible for showing differences. Let me just try disable my dark theme a minute and see. My eyes are burning. Nope, that's still the same. So one thing I detest with merge conflicts is the absolute horseshit of tools that try to show the difference. I mean, that's terrible. That's basically trying to show you that, in this case on master, that one commit has nothing, so it's blank between there and the equal sign, and the other commit has this value. So this is my code, and I only know that because I know the code. So that's my code, and this is the merge conflict code. There's nothing there. So you go to the next one. That means this is the current pull request, and this is my code, and there's differences. So you can already tell by looking at this, I wouldn't want to try and even merge this. It's like trying to then just go, oh yeah, we'll accept this bit of code here and we won't accept this, is just going to be awful. So you try to really avoid merge conflicts, because they're nasty, they're messy, they're hard to merge. And you usually, when you merge them, you introduce more bugs in code than you can imagine. You can just go to the commit and look at it much nicer here to see the difference. You can also see a typo I've made there. But the fact that this is now trying to address an issue that we've changed in a different way, and this change is a lot more substantial than my simpler change, I'm just going to basically reject this now and say that, we've since fixed it. And funnily enough, this is the developer that helped me with this thread locking issue. So, credit goes to him for this fix, but we're not going to accept his current changes because I've since changed the code when this fix was made and also fixed it in a different way. So in this case, you can basically see the difference when there's a conflict. I'll go through, potentially if we have to merge a commit with merge conflicts, I'll show you how to go through it, but you can basically see from here, it's very hard to even visually understand what's going on. This is the code that wants to be merged, and this is our code, and this is the pointing code where it's happening. But visually to see that's very hard. It's easier to see it in the commit at least, but it's still hard to judge code based on fragmented sections of code like this. And we'd have to, specifically click what we'd want to keep compared to what we'd want to leave. But as we're not going to do that, we just drop down here, leave a comment, since fixed in another commit. And we want to, in fact, no, it's not the review changes, because we're going to basically reject it. So for that, we want to close the pull request down here. So I'll put the comment in here, since fixed in another commit, and close and comment. So that will now basically close that off and not merge it. So it's basically been ignored, if you will. And that's that. So now we won't have any pull requests. The code's all up to date. Everything's pushed and sourced. And we're good to go. So hopefully that was useful. You've learned and seen a bit about merging pull requests, fixing your code, how to see to-dos in the list that I think a lot of people won't realize that you can do, that's very useful. And also the importance of maintaining your code so these kind of small issues and small fixes don't grow to being hundreds of warnings and hundreds of little things you need to fix that never get fixed in code, which is a very classic pattern. As always, leave any questions or comments, and if I've helped you at all in this video, please do consider donating.